Hey church family, thanks for joining us for today's Daily Devotional. This week we are talking about honoring life. And yesterday we got a chance to look in the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew chapter 5, verse 21, where Jesus recalls the Old Testament law that says that if you murder someone, then you are subject to judgment. And that seems like common sense, right? We don't murder people. That's not right. And a lot of times people would look and say that when Jesus came, he alleviated some of the seriousness of the law, that he made it a little bit easier for us. But the reality is, Jesus did just the opposite of that. Jesus actually intensified the law. He intensified the consequences for the law. He intensified the reach of the law. And we see that in the first part of verse 22. So again, verse 21 talks about how he says, you have heard from your ancestors that to murder someone is wrong and you'll be subject to judgment. And then he comes right back to verse 22. We're just going to look at the first part of 22 today. And he says, but I tell you, so you've been told that to murder is wrong, but I tell you, everyone who is angry with his brother or sister will be subject to judgment. So Jesus takes this idea of murder, which causes you to be subject to judgment, and he says, hey, you don't even have to go as far as to murder someone to be subject to judgment, but to be angry at them makes you subject to judgment. Now, something that Jesus is doing here that he's going to do all throughout chapter 5 is what I mentioned this yesterday. He's going to take a law that was seen externally and he makes it about the heart. He makes it internal. But something else he does here is he puts murder and anger on the same playing field. Hey, no longer is murder a greater sin than anger. No, now to be angry is just as bad as to murder someone. I think sometimes we make the mistake of ranking sin and saying, well, that sin's worse than this sin, so the one that's not as bad is more acceptable. And Jesus says, oh no, not at all. See, because Jesus isn't concerned with the action of the sin alone. He's concerned with the heart behind the action. And what's going on in the heart. That's the sin that Jesus is talking about here. And if that's the standard that Jesus is making, then we have to look at sin and see that it's all the same. That sin has the same result for everyone. The reality is sin, the result of sin is death. And it doesn't matter what sin that is. It doesn't matter if that sin is murder or if that sin is gossip. It doesn't matter if that sin is adultery or if that sin is gluttony. Sin, no matter what it is, has the same result, and that is death. And so Jesus is making that clear in the Sermon on the Mount. He is showing them, hey, this is the standard that my Father expects. So our author gives us a couple of questions that we can look at. The first one says, how did Jesus elevate God's standards in the minds of the people? Well, how did Jesus do that? How did Jesus kind of show them God's standard and elevate that? And then that second question, why is anger like murder? I think those are two questions that can get you some lively discussion if you're with someone right now, if you're alone, some great journaling material, great things to kind of chew on and meditate on throughout the day. And I want you to know that today, as you're working through that I love you and I'm praying for you.